Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Ann Auburn, owner and founder of the Natural Health Improvement Center in Grandville, Michigan. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about heavy metal toxicity and chelation therapy and a lot of other things that could impact your health. Welcome to the show. So, first of all, why is detox important? From the Centers for Disease Control, this statement is: the epidemic of cardiovascular disease, as well as immunological and neurological diseases, is likely associated with environmental toxins. So there you have it. A good detox can get your health back on track. So what are the benefits of detoxification? Normalizing the body's innate ability to detoxify, preserve body tissues and bodily functions to maintain quality of life as we age, prevent and or improve disease states, including but not limited to cardiovascular, neurological, immune, and the list goes on, gut health, and others. Limit the extent of daily toxin exposure from contaminated air, food, water, etc., and improve immune system function and decrease the risk for cancer and other degenerative diseases. So here are some of the heavy metals we're going to be talking tonight. These guys are the main players probably as far as severity: mercury, lead, arsenic, and cadmium. There are others: aluminum, thallium, nickel, but those aren't quite as toxic. Basically, these guys can cause a lot of problems in the vascular system. It causes increased oxidative stress and inflammation. It reduces oxidative defense. It also reduces your mitochondrial function. Therefore, you have less cellular energy for everything to go right at the cell and inside the cell. Blood clots, vascular smooth muscle dysfunction, endothelial dysfunction. I'll talk about that a little bit later, what actually causes that. And cholesterol profile abnormalities. Now, I'm not saying that detoxing heavy metals lowers your cholesterol. I don't want you to get that impression, but because of the inflammation, sometimes the cholesterol profile can look worse and can be more oxidized, therefore causing more damage at your arteries. Also, immune dysfunction, and all heavy metals are neurotoxins. This is a known fact, and I've actually had people come to my office that were having mental issues, memory issues, and we detoxed them of heavy metals, and 20 or 30 chelation treatments later, they're feeling amazing. So we'll tell you more about that a little bit later and how that works. So heavy metal toxin effects, again, very specific disorders that this can cause would be hypertension, coronary artery disease, heart attacks, arrhythmias, increased thickness of the carotid artery walls and blockages, reduced heart rate variability, stroke, generalized atherosclerosis, that's your blockages, your plaque, and kidney dysfunction and protein in the urine. We'll get into that a little bit later because you have some kind of kidney damage a lot earlier than you would think, especially with lead, and that's documented in the literature. Cadmium has a weaker cardiovascular effect, but as it accumulates in the kidney, it is associated also with proteinuria and kidney dysfunction, leading to hypertension. There's several papers, and I did not bring all these into my talk today because it would be too much, but there are several papers linking cadmium and lead to hypertension with fairly good proof. Mercury, cadmium, lead, and other heavy metals impair enzyme functions, and some of these enzyme functions help to metabolize epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine. That's the COMT system. And this may lead to hypertension as the first clue to heavy metal toxicity. And there's your COMT, catechol O methyltransferase. All right. Heavy metals in circulation. Heavy metal toxins do cause inflammation and excess of free radicals. Free radicals damage tissue. We know that. This can lead to tissue damage and or plaque buildup in vessels, which can lead to circulation problems. And this can result in decreased circulation to the heart, brain. It can cause chest pain, stroke, foot infections, especially in diabetics, brain fogginess, and increased fatigue. So those are some of the things that you might see. And in one study, and I don't have this in my possession anymore, but years and years ago, I had this clip of a study saying that the hearts of congestive heart failure patients compared to those with normal hearts had 70,000 times more mercury. And so next time you have a friend, or if you know somebody who has enlarged heart or a congestive heart failure, which is very common when we're older in our 80s or 90s, those people, many of them will have mercury as the cause. But let's start talking about lead exposure in adults. Lead has many adverse health effects, as many of you probably have heard. Um, some of the symptoms can be fatigue, irritability, hearing loss, reduced IQ, especially in children with developing nervous systems, infertility, hypertension, heart disease, chronic kidney disease, memory problems, peripheral neuropathy, that's the numbness, tingling, burning pain in the extremities, especially the feet and legs, arthralgias, meaning joint pain, myalgia, meaning muscle pain and gout, nausea and constipation, other gut issues as well, seizures, coma, death at very high levels. Now, this is an acute toxic exposure where the blood levels are just being totally up all the time because of contaminated water or something like that. And also we can see antisocial behavior or even psychosis, schizophrenia. We've had patients at our office that were diagnosed as schizophrenic, and they're extreme improvement when we do chelation. It's almost unbelievable how much better they are. They have a better quality of life. They're basically almost don't even have their diagnosis anymore. And this isn't in every case, but we have seen it happen. And it's documented in the literature. So this is another thing about lead is lead has no toxic threshold. What does that mean? It means there's no toxic threshold for lead, and there's no measurable level of lead in the body below which no harm occurs. So I'll read that again. This means that there's no measurable level of lead in the body below which no harm occurs. And this is according to the CDC, the EPA, and another agency a lot of you may not have heard of called the ATSDR, the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. So these guys, national organizations are saying there's no safe level of lead. So lead, you might be wondering, okay, what are the sources? Where could I be getting this from? Leaded pipes. A lot of these water systems until 1970 were using leaded pipes. In fact, you may even have a brand new house, but the system that it's running off of down the road or a couple miles away has leaded pipes. Glazed jugs like your kind of Mexican or Latino or even European type ceramic sort of materials and the paints, leaded crystal, embedded bullets, petroleum, even herbal medicines you have to really watch these and make sure that they're either organic or that they are tested for heavy metals. And if you don't know, you should call the manufacturer and ask. Also paints, varnishes, polishes. And surprisingly, I'll give you some more facts about wine. Wine is pretty bad. Dirt in your garden, and that may be okay at a very tiny level, but you don't want a lot of it. Paint chips, industrial exposures, smelting, car shipwrecking, construction, petroleum refining, etc., etc. So typical sources of lead would be wines. So let me tell you a little bit about wine. 432 wines were tested in this study, and you can look it up. It's there at the bottom of the slide. And the lead in domestic wines range from 1 to 522 parts per billion and an average of 41. So, okay, yes, some are worse than others. The level of imported wines ranged from 4 to 673 parts per billion with an average of 94. So all the wines are suspect. Now there are reportedly some wines that are organic. Those might be better. Also wines from Argentina, Brazil, Australia, and other places like that. Many times are grown in places that aren't necessarily organic, but they're not using chemicals, and they're very clean and pristine grounds that they're growing them on. So beware of wine for lead exposure. Other sources, now this isn't happening as much anymore, but jewelry, non-compliant jewelry that gets imported from other countries, particularly China. This is an example of a non-compliant necklace that contained 72,000 parts per million lead. And that laying on your skin could transfer that lead through into your system. So that's pretty toxic. And lead in other sources. Lipstick is a real bad one. In October of 2007, the Campaign for Safe Cosmetic tested 33 brands, and 61 of them contained lead, with the levels ranging from up to 0.65 parts per million. And these included some of your very popular brands. You can read them there. And this is, an older study. These things may be better now, but if you don't know for sure, you can ask the manufacturer. But I try to get natural lipstick and natural makeup products as much as I can. In response to this issue, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration promised to conduct their own study, but it took them 2 years and lots of encouragement by complaining customers and 3 senators that sent a letter telling them that they had to get this done. And when they released their follow-up study in 2009, all of the samples of lipstick that were tested were had lead in them, and it was 4 times higher than the campaign study samples. So this is, in mass manufacturing of these goods, sometimes you will find this in these products, and you have to be an investigator. If you there's an app you can get on your phone called EWG Healthy Living, and there's another one called Think Dirty, and there's another one called Yucca, YUKA. And those apps will allow you to scan products to see if they're healthy or not, or contaminated or not. I know the Yucca app actually lists the contaminants, and they all rate them on some kind of scale for you. When you're looking for purses, also the red and yellow dyes can be a problem, so be aware of that. Other sources, mini blinds. These were tested by the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and they've determined that the mini blinds deteriorate and their dust contains high levels of lead. And it can end up on the hands, in the mouth. You can breathe little teeny particles in. Also, burning candles. When you buy your candles, make sure that they don't have lead in them and they don't have lead wicks. If a candle does have a lead wick, it can excrete out or send out as much as 36 times that allowed by the EPA into the air, and it can stay in the air for hours and hours after the candle's done burning. So be aware of those candles. All right, lead and other sources of exposure. Of course, water. You have to make sure that your water's clean. You can have it city tested, or you can go to doctorsdata.com and get a water test, which is probably a little bit better. I think it costs about $100. We'll test more things, and that's doctorsdata.com. They'll send you a kit that you can send back, but 98% of homes have lead in their plumbing from lead and copper pipes connected by lead solder. And also chrome-plated faucets are made of brass containing up to 8% lead. So watch those home water sources and pipes. Lead toxicity and blood levels. Okay, so I want to make sure you all understand this, because a lot of people have been tested for blood levels of lead and they think, oh, great, I'm in the normal range. Adults, it's less than 10 micrograms per deciliter, and for children, less than 5 micrograms per deciliter. But, you have to think about this. Despite a greater than 75% reduction in blood levels since the 70s, 38% of U.S. adults have levels of 2 micrograms per deciliter or greater. And that level, even though it's lower than the quote unquote normal blood levels, that level of 2 micrograms per deciliter in blood is associated with hypertension, chronic kidney disease, heart attacks, and there has been 151 to 248% increase in deaths from stroke, and an 88 to 189% increase in deaths from heart attack. So that's from the journal Circulation from 2006. So that was a while ago, but still, even today, these lead levels that are acceptable are higher than what they should be. So beware if you do have a blood lead level greater than 2 micrograms or 2 micrograms per deciliter or higher. This could be damaging heart vessels and kidneys. And you should look further. That probably means you have some kind of ongoing exposure, and you should find out where it is. So, lead, how does it cause damage? Well, we mentioned this a little bit earlier. Oxidative stress produces reactive oxygen species. Those are, they call them ROSs, and that's a type of free radical. Free radicals damage tissues and things that they bump into. And then this lowers the production of nitric oxide, NO. This lowering of nitric oxide leads to development of diseases in part by inhibition of the nitric oxide. Things like hypertension, coronary artery disease, idiopathic dilated cardiomyopathy, heart attack, myocardial infarction, and chronic kidney disease. So let's look at how this actually happens. So nitric oxide is also known as endothelial-derived relaxation factor because it does so many things for the blood vessels. It dilates blood vessels, and you've probably heard of drinking beet juice or something like that, things that increase nitric oxide like citrulline and arginine. You see those products out there. It does dilate blood vessels, so would reduce hypertension. It also reduces platelet stickiness. So if your platelets aren't sticky, then you're less likely to form blood clots if you're kind of on the edge. Also reduces monocyte stickiness. This is, again, preventing formation of plaque. It reduces multiplication of smooth muscle cells of the artery wall. This happens, all of these things can tend to happen if there's too much sugar in your diet, too much inflammation, too much stress, family history, genetics, too high of the bad LDL and lipoprotein little a and ApoB cholesterol. So all of these factors go together, and if your nitric oxide is low, it's going to make it much easier for that plaque to be formed. Nitric oxide reduces the release of superoxide radicals, so reduces free radicals. And it also reduces oxidation of LDL cholesterol, as I was just mentioning there. So a lot of mechanisms, and we want that nitric oxide, so we want to get the lead out. We want to get the heavy metals out of our body. All right, so let's just take a look at a cell for a second. If we cut that cell, cut a quarter of that cell out and kind of look inside that cell, you can see that there's a membrane that makes up that cell. It's actually 2 layers if you look at it there. See if I can point my arrow at it sort of for you. 2 layers, and bilipid layers is what they call them. The little bubbles there are lipids. And this is what gets oxidized from the free radical damage and leads to cell membrane damage, inflammation, blocked arteries, heart attacks, strokes, etc. So just wanted to give you a visual on that so you can see that it's at the cellular level that these things are causing problems. Metal exposure from agricultural products. Okay, so this is another place where we can get these damaging heavy metals. Crops and pastures may be legally contaminated with toxic metals from zinc, micronutrient, fertilizers, also known as biosolids. This is sewage sludge. Well, if people are getting exposed to heavy metals, they maybe have heavy metals in their mouth, like mercury in their silver fillings, or petroleum products, or wherever they're getting it, they're going to poop some of that out. And then some of that sewage is going to be used as fertilizer. So biosolids as fertilizer. Dried sewage sludge is another form of fertilizer. Contains human biliary excrement and contents of wastewater. And again, it contains all these nasty heavy metals. So industrial toxic wastes and organic fertilizers as well. Manufacturers buy industrial toxic wastes as a cheap source of growth-enhancing zinc and iron. The wastes frequently contain arsenic, lead, mercury, cadmium, chromium, the bad kind of chromium, and dioxins. About half the U.S. zinc fertilizer is made with about 46,000 tons of hazardous waste. So, toxic metals in fertilizer, 20 out of 29 fertilizers purchased in the United States contain levels of toxic metals that exceed EPA limits set for wastes destined to public landfills. So, the California Department of Food and Agriculture predicts that food grown and contaminated fertilizers will be the greatest single source of exposure among commercial products and an adverse health risk. All right, heavy metals in circulation. So I talked about the silver amalgam fillings used by many dentists. Those contain 50 to 70% mercury. Every time you drink something hot or cold, and the teeth expand or contract, and that also happens when you're chewing food, things like that. That mercury will come out. It'll combine with the cells that are in the walls of the mouth, the mucous membranes. When those slough off, you swallow them, and then it becomes part of the whole makeup of the stool. Or it can go, part of that mercury can get stuck in the body too. But hopefully most of it gets pooped out. This fecal mercury represents a huge source of environmental mercury, probably the largest at this point in time. As it says here, dental amalgams are the primary source of mercury in feces. And you can see by this chart is showing the purple lines, the purple bars are the amount of mercury. And down at the bottom is the number of amalgam fillings. So as you go to the right, if a person has more and more and more amalgam, those are the silver fillings, in the stool test, they will have more and more and more fecal mercury. So it's a direct correlation that mercury is going through the body. And some of it's getting dumped and left in there and stored in organs. So the EPA cites mercury as air pollutant of greatest concern. Greater than 50 tons per year of mercury from combustion in the U.S., from coal-fired power plants, municipal and hospital waste, and Michigan is amongst the top 10 emitters. A lot of those are, agricultural or industrial states, Midwest, South, etc. So, also, we can't leave out mercury in fish. The FDA threshold limit for commercial fish is 1 part per million. Fish consumption advisories are held in 43 states, maybe more because the state is just a little bit old. Women and young children should not eat any shark, swordfish, tilefish, or king mackerel. So 10% of all women have blood mercury levels greater than the amount needed for fetal risk for neurological effects. And virtually almost every child is born with some mercury and 250 some other chemicals at the time of birth, because we do live on a toxic planet. This is why we have to detoxify, not just for the heavy metals, but also for chemicals. And we do that, and I'll show you how we do that at our clinic. Fish to avoid would be king mackerel, tuna steaks, canned albacore tuna, although you can do skipjack tuna or safe catch tuna. Great Lakes fish, marlin, Mexican tilefish, shark, swordfish, grouper, walleye, and orange roughy. Now, some of the walleye probably that is raised in streams or very small lakes that aren't as contaminated might be safe, just for you walleye lovers out there. All right, and then the FDA recommendation for fish in adults, 1 to 2 6-ounce servings per week. And they recommend Alaskan salmon, pollock, tilapia, but that's not really on my list anymore because I can't find it anywhere where it's not farm raised. But if you can find non-farm raised tilapia, please let me know. Also Pacific cod, halibut, skipjack light tuna or safe catch tuna, and trout. So always I recommend to my patients that they always get wild caught fish. I know Vital Choice is a great online frozen seafood. A lot of times too at our local markets, we can get some decent stuff, but always ask if it's farm raised. So I want to tell you a little bit about fungal methylation of mercury. There is this phenomenon where if you have mercury toxicity, what happens is both Candida and Saccharomyces, they can be transformed into, the mercury can be transformed into methylmercury, which is more toxic. And this is in proportion to the amount of mercury that's added. And the Candida albicans does this at the highest rate. So basically, if you have mercury, you're going to have Candida. If you have Candida, you're going to have mercury coming to kind of bind that up. So mercury is kind of a survival mechanism for the yeast. The yeast like mercury, but unfortunately, that changes it into the methylmercury form, which is more toxic. And maybe this is why a lot of people with Candida overgrowth have gut problems, bowel dysbiosis, gas bloating, leaky gut syndrome, etc. But the moral of the story is that mercury makes you more likely to have Candida overgrowth, leaky gut, and the associated symptoms. All right. Metals compromise immunity. So lower numbers and activities of macrophages and natural killer cells occur when you have heavy metal toxicity. These are all specialized white blood cells. Lower resistance to bacterial, protozoa, and fungal overgrowth in the body. Lower antiviral and tumoricidal, that's anti-cancer activity as well. So these things are affected by heavy metals. So decreased immunity with heavy metals, here's a little pictorial for you. Just think Pac-Man, mercury, lead, arsenic, nickel, cadmium, and tin. They lower the cell numbers of and phagocytic activity. Phagocytic is, like the Pac-Man where the white blood cell goes and engulfs the foreign invader. And less of that is going to happen if you've got these heavy metals sitting around in your body in halfway decent numbers. And we'll get into that later, like what is too much and how do we test it. So when this happens, you can get altered gastrointestinal and immune function, and this alters your immune status. You're just not going to get as good of absorption, assimilation of your nutrients, and so things just don't work as well in the immune system. And the prevalence of gastrointestinal problems is very common. Digestive and elimination problems are one of the most common reasons people come to my office. And at university level research, it shows that heavy metals damage the lining of the gut. They lead to many GI health problems. And this is according to one of my favorite people, Dr. Boyd Haley, PhD, heavy metal toxin expert. So I want to just differentiate here for you on the different types of testing. Like everybody thinks, I have to run out and get a blood test for heavy metals now. Well, that just may not be enough, because basically when you're looking at blood, you have to remember that it's just looking at exposure. And this can be like a regular blood test that you get at a regular lab, or there's a RBC elements test from doctor's data. Any kind of blood sample that shows, it will show exposure over the last 1 to 2 weeks. After 1 to 2 weeks, it doesn't stay in your blood anymore. After this, it's going to be stored in body tissues or excreted if the body can do that. But basically, once it does get into the body tissues, it can stay in the body for up to 90 years. Now, you do have some natural mechanisms in the body for getting rid of these things, like glutathione produced by the liver and sulfur molecules, and even vitamin C and some chlorophyll from some of the green foods you eat will bind some of it. But, we have so many toxins in our world today. I just wouldn't depend on that taking care of your heavy metals. I don't have this slide in here, but basically the bones of people from 2,000 years ago had almost no lead in them. And now today, 2,000 years later, when you compare the lead in the old bones to the new bones, we have many, many times more. It's at least 100 times more. I don't remember the exact number, but I used to have that slide in my talk. So anyway, exposure means we know it's been there, but we have no idea how much, and it doesn't show all of the toxin that has been retained in the body. You could have been exposed to mercury or lead or something last week, and if you check your blood 2 weeks from now, it's not going to be there anymore. So this is an RBC blood cell elements test showing exposure. This person was using a facial cream called Facial Renovate, and the mercury content was outrageous. It was 13,300 micrograms per gram. Commercial fish is less than 0.5 parts per million. You can see the high levels like this in blood or hair tests because they're kind of using it every day or frequently. And the same thing will happen if you're eating like regular tuna a lot or something else that has a lot of heavy metals in it. But 2 weeks after this exposure has stopped, then the test will be normal. But now the heavy metals are probably stuck in the body, most of them. So therefore, this test doesn't give the amount of retained heavy metals, but it is good to do a blood test once in a while just to see if the person may be having an ongoing daily or almost daily exposure. If the person is having a daily exposure or continually being exposed with high blood lead, then you have to figure out where it's coming from, blood lead or mercury or whatever. So even though blood is only accurate or is only for acute exposure, 7 to 14 days, it can be helpful to remind us there might be damage or disease lurking. And especially lead, because remember in the 2006 study I mentioned earlier, levels of 2 micrograms per deciliter or above can be increased risk for heart attack, stroke, hypertension, chronic kidney disease. All right, hair analysis. So this is another way we can look for heavy metals. Now this one looks about 2 to 4 months back in time. So our blood was looking 1 to 2 weeks back in time. And now this is exposure of the previous 2 to 4 months. It's an excretory tissue, hair is, and it will bind the circulating metals and it'll concentrate them. And actually in hair, it could be 200 to 300 times greater than what it is in the blood. So it is, again, another good way to look for fairly recent exposure, useful for recent or ongoing exposure. But again, no direct indication of net retention in the body, what's still stuck in there. So that's where we do a urine toxic metals test. Urine toxic metals test is the way that we see, do you still have it stuck in your body and is it doing damage with you not even knowing it? So a urine toxic metals test, or we call it a UTM, it shows retention of heavy metals that are still in the body. It is testing using a chelating agent, EDTA or DMPS or DMSA. Although I haven't been able to get DMPS in quite some time, we do use a lot of oral DMSA and EDTA, and we have 2 kinds of EDTA. And these are used to bind the heavy metals that can be removed and shows you the amount that can come out with one chelation treatment. You certainly would need many more than one chelation treatment, probably somewhere between 20 and 80 chelation treatments to really get the majority of the heavy metals out of your body. But the chelating agent pulls it out. And I'll show you why we do this in just a minute. I'll show you a test that did not use a chelator and a test that did use a chelator. So chelators basically are, that term comes from the word claw. Chel means claw. And when a chelator is used, it actually surrounds the heavy metal. It's not like a binder that just goes and kind of binds it and takes most of it out of the body or could drop it off somewhere else. This is a chelator, and it will bind that and stay bound until you pee or poop it out. So that's a chelator. That's why we do that with the urine toxic metals test. Now here's a urine toxic metals test where the person did not use a chelator. And there, as you can see there, everything's in the green column. So it looks like everything's pretty much normal. And this is a different person, but for example's sake, it could be the same person because now you're using a chelator, and this one they did DMPS, and this person has super exaggerated levels of lead and mercury. The lead, look at that, it's like at least 5 times what it should be. The mercury is hundreds of times, probably, well, not hundreds, probably about 50 or 60 times what it should be. And this source of this lead and mercury And looks like there's quite a bit of antimony there too. Antimony isn't quite as toxic, but the source was a boxed wine called Franzia wine in the box. And this was, 3 to 11 times greater for the lead and antimony than the EPA limits, and 50 or 60 times for the mercury. So there's why we use chelating agents with our urine toxic metals test, and why it's so accurate to find out what is stuck in your body. So exposure does not mean toxicity. Exposure is exposure. We look at blood and hair for that if we want to. And then assimilation is it's getting into the body, and then retention is what we want to look for on the urine toxic metals test. And if we don't get it out of there, it will cause some toxicity. Now, true toxicity is when your levels are so high that you're getting, acute symptoms with it. You may feel really poorly. You may have brain fog, tiredness, appetite changes, things like that. Most people, when they have heavy metal toxins retained in their body, they don't feel that. It's a very insidious, very, you don't know it's happening, but it's causing damage. And that's why we want to check people for this when they have lots of crazy symptoms. Make sure they don't have heavy metals. All right, treatment strategies. So you can remove leaded paint from your home, use lead test strips that you can buy online to just set them on the paint or the cup or the painted glassware or whatever to see if there's lead in it. They don't have that for all the heavy metals, but I do know they have it for lead. Filter your drinking water. Choose herbal products tested for heavy metals. Remove your silver amalgam fillings in your mouth. In fact, if you go to Germany and you have cancer, the first thing they're going to do is send you to the dentist to get those heavy metal fillings out. So I got mine out 20 some years ago, and I'm really glad I did it because I don't have to worry about that. When you do have your heavy metals taken out, though, make sure you go to a biological dentist. We have lists. We have a dentist list at our office for you. And make sure that you are given a prescription for DMSA so that when you get that silver filling taken out, you don't swallow, or if you do swallow some of it, immediately you've already got the chelator in there to pull it out so you don't get contaminated. And those dentists use special methods to pull out the fillings and use high flow suction so that you're minimally exposed. And the other piece of this is also maintain really strong bones. When you maintain strong bones with exercise and vitamins and minerals and hormones, if it's appropriate for like a menopausal woman, your bones will hold in there the heavy metals that are in there instead of letting them just, come out with all the bone that's being released when the bones are breaking down. And like I said earlier, maintaining healthy bones, keep bones from breaking down to prevent the release of stored lead. Minerals like magnesium, calcium, zinc, molybdenum, manganese, et cetera, all of those help the bone. And vitamin D, vitamin K, exercise, and hormones if you can take them if you're a candidate. All right, other treatment strategies. Now, these are the simple ones. I'm going to give you some other ones later, but also sweating through exercise and sauna. It removes heavy metals. Dr. Quigg at Doctor's Data actually tested this. He had a bunch of people on staff sweat in a sauna and collect their sweat, and it had lots of junk in it, chemicals and heavy metals. So if you can sweat in a sauna, or even if you can just exercise will, through that sweat, will release lots of heavy metals. And as you can see, there's a journal article there, International Journal of Cardiology 2012. They looked at sauna treatments for getting lead out. And also, if you exercise and sweat out toxins, you also reduce your risk of diabetes by 50%, reduce your risk of heart disease by 50%, reduce your risk of colon cancer by 40%, reduce your risk of breast cancer by 40%, and reduce your risk of Alzheimer's by 50%. So exercise. Dr. Auburn's mantra, exercise. All right. So if you want to do a simple detox, now this is not what I would recommend for somebody who had high heavy metals like that slide I showed you earlier. But if you want to do some kind of prevention and maintenance to keep lead, mercury, et cetera, out of the body, I would do Ultra Clear Renew. It has additional things in it to help your liver. Ultra Clear Plus is really great. and it's fantastic for your liver. And I do one of these cleanses, Ultra Clear Plus or Ultra Clear Renew, twice a year. Um, the autopsies show that the liver is the largest repository of soft tissue lead, 33%. If you detox the liver with Ultra Clear Plus or Ultra Clear Renew twice per year, you're getting some of that out. And then lead storage is followed by, after the liver, kidney, then pancreas, then ovary, then spleen, prostate, adrenal glands, brain, fat, testicles, heart, skeletal muscle, and then bone. So all of those are places that your body can store lead. Now, supplements to help heavy metal detox are N-acetylcysteine and alpha-lipoic acid. Those are both precursors to glutathione. Actually, I take one of each per day because I want the alpha-lipoic acid sulfur pool to stay adequate. And I know things in my diet help that too, like onions and garlic and all of those great foods, eggs, that has sulfur in it too. And then the cysteine from the N-acetylcysteine, those combine together to make glutathione. Now, you can take L-glutathione straight, but I wouldn't recommend just any glutathione. This one from Orthomolecular is excellent. And Nanobac TX is another oral EDTA that we use. None of these are as good as doing IV chelation, intravenous chelation. And vitamin C helps a little bit too. But we would decide in the office, if you're a case that really could use intravenous chelation. If you have vascular disease, definitely, or if you have diabetes, you really should be doing IV chelation. All right, and increasing glutathione, as I mentioned before, N-acetylcysteine, alpha-lipoic acid, vitamin C, curcumin, and things like Mariva SF or Turmeric Complete. Also, all of these regenerate and spare glutathione, plus vitamins, the B vitamins, B6, riboflavin, B2, and niacin B3, and magnesium and selenium. They all help you to maintain that pool of glutathione production. So what is chelation therapy? I know I explained it a little bit earlier. Remember, the Greek word chel means claw, and that's because that chelator, that chemical, comes together like this and binds and holds that heavy metal. And it surrounds it, and it takes the heavy metal with it out of the body. So IV chelation, EDTA is the most common chelator used and is a synthetic amino acid that removes heavy metal toxins such as lead, aluminum, cadmium, arsenic. It will take out some mercury and nickel as well. A lot of this depends on how much you have of all of these chelators. If you have a lot of lead, like I tell my patients, there's only so many binding sites or so many seats on the bus. So that chelator, that amino acid, there's only so many seats on that bus. And if it's all taken up by lead, well, you're not going to pick up the excess aluminum, cadmium, etc. You might pick up a little bit, but this is true for all the chelators. It will go for the thing that it goes for first, has a higher binding affinity for, and it also will bind the thing that is the most prevalent as well. So both of those factors are part of the chemistry that goes on to decide, to help your chelators and your body decide which heavy metals are going to go first. And a lot of times in the heavy metal test, patients will see one goes way, way, way down, one heavy metal, and then another one will go up, and they think, oh no, it's not working. But that actually means it is working, because remember, there's only so many seats on the bus. When all or a lot of the lead has been taken out, then the aluminum and cadmium and other heavy metals can jump on the bus. So that don't let that surprise you if that happens to you and you're getting chelation therapy and you're doing serial urine toxic metals tests. Often we do use 2 chelators when we're trying to move heavy metals from a patient. A lot of times we'll prescribe DMSA orally so they can take it between getting their IV chelations. And then we may also have them increase the glutathione by taking those other supplements I mentioned earlier. And what does EDTA chelation do? Well, it does more than take heavy metals out, actually. It's a strong antioxidant. It gets rid of those nasty free radicals that damage things. It's a very light anticoagulant. It really doesn't affect blood thinners using them or testing for them. It works a different way. It improves blood rheology or blood flow by making the blood cells more slippery and not as likely to stick to each other. Immunity is improved and circulation is improved throughout the body in the small and large blood vessels. That's another thing about chelation is you're affecting every blood vessel in the body. We think it even reconditions the inside of the blood vessels. Maybe that's why it's so great for diabetics, as you'll see in the TACT study, the trial to assess chelation therapy. I'll tell you about that later. It also removes calcium from arterial plaques. Calcium is part of that plaque. And helps to deposit that calcium properly into tissues. And it stabilizes the cell membrane and reduces damage to arteries. So that's that reconditioning I was talking about. It also increases magnesium in the cell. It reduces spasms. It reduces inflammation at the cellular level. So lots of things. Now here's our TACT study. Here's our graph showing that 18%, they saw 18% reduction in recurrent events in patients who had already had heart attacks, who were maximally medically treated. And they divided them into 4 groups, chelation, nothing, vitamins, and chelation plus vitamins. And in the people who got the chelation, there was a hugely significant difference between them and the people who got the placebo with no chelation. There was an 18% reduction in recurrent heart attack. And then they found something very surprising. They weren't even looking for this, but in the diabetics in the group, there was a 39% reduction. And they couldn't quite explain that. They're going to look into this later. But this was so successful that Dr. Antonio Lamas, who designed this study, said that, if this were a medication, if it were a brand new drug, it would be a multi-trillion-dollar drug. But the patent on EDTA for chelation, IV chelation, went out in the 50s. So it's not a big moneymaker for anybody. But because we want to help people and help people avoid surgery and procedures and heart attacks and things like that, we do it at our office. All right. And so the TACT study, trial to assess chelation therapy, you can always call my office and get an info sheet on this. The study was overseen by Dr. Gao and then designed by Dr. Lamas, as I said earlier. And these guys are cardiologists. They just wanted to know if it works because their patients were asking about it. And they saw that, hey, the smaller studies did show something. They enrolled 1,708 patients. And this was throughout US and Canada at various clinics. And all of the patients had a history of heart attack. And like I said, they were all maximally treated with medical management before they were entered into the study. And they were all 50 years old or older, and they all had good kidney function. And the participants were asked to do 40 IV chelations. And one of the other things that came from this is that they showed that there was no kidney damage in anybody at this normal dose of chelation. So that's always something that kind of, people will bring up or people will read on the internet, oh, chelation damages your kidneys. Well, no, it doesn't. They actually proved beyond a shadow of a doubt it does not damage your kidneys. In fact, sometimes we see with people that do have less than perfect kidney function, it actually many times will get better. So, and as I told you earlier, low levels of lead can cause chronic kidney disease. Okay, so the main TACT study results, like I said, 18% fewer cardiovascular events. These included death, heart attack, stroke, hospitalizations for angina compared to the placebo group. And the diabetics fared even better with a 39% reduction. All right, and there was many other things in this study. I'll just tell you a brief few things. A reduction, also they saw a reduction in the need for future cardiovascular surgeries. And the surprise was the diabetics benefited the most. And also people who had had more severe heart attacks, those people also benefited a little bit more. And again, they proved that it did not damage the kidneys. And additionally, another researcher, Dr. Terry Chappell, observed that EDTA chelation has been proven to be safe. It's a treatment there was only 2 unexpected deaths, and it was 1 in each group, the placebo group and the chelation group. So chelation therapy showed an unexpected treatment benefit in post-MI patients who were already on evidence-based traditional medical therapy with drugs and lifestyle changes. All right, so other studies. Now, these are much smaller studies from the past. In 2004, the PATCH study, coronary artery disease and angina. The 84 patients, it showed that 75% fewer chelation patients had bypass compared to those who did not receive IV chelation. All right, and the 3 studies on disodium EDTA chelation and peripheral vascular disease, Sloth-Nielsen, etc., peripheral vascular disease with claudication. That's where when people walk and their legs are painful because the blood flow is not good in their legs. The chelation patients improved 100% more than the controls. In the study in New Zealand for peripheral vascular disease, chelation patients improved 78% more than controls. And then in the, looks like Deem, Shetler, and Heidelberg study in 1986, peripheral vascular disease, claudication again, they were looking at maximum walking distance, and the chelation patients increased walking distance without claudication 400% more than controls. Even though these were small studies, is pretty significant. All right, studies on disodium EDTA chelation. Now, real quickly, I'm just going to run through the results here. Let's see, this first study was pre-surgery patients. 58 out of 65 doing chelation canceled their bypass surgery. 24 of 27 were able to cancel amputation. Oh my goodness. And Dr. Lamas is actually studying that right now. Last time I saw him speak, he showed us some amazing photos of people that were about to get their foot or toes cut off, and they pinked right up by doing 3 chelations a week for about 30 or 40 chelations. It was pretty impressive. Doppler results in 30 patients with carotid artery stenosis, 30 treatments each, 21% plaque reduction, and was demonstrated with the disodium EDTA chelation. That's the IV chelation. Terry Chappell in 2005, let's see, he did a retrospective study. It was 220 consecutive vascular patients treated at 8 centers. This is what he found: 62.5% reduction in expected bypass surgery, 93.6% reduction in expected angioplasties. That's where they put the little stent in there, or they replace an artery. 0 deaths, 6 were expected. 0 heart attacks, 15 were expected. 68.7% complete resolution of symptoms. And then Chappell and Stahl did another study in 2001, and they did a meta-analysis of all of the EDTA published studies. And there were 19 studies they looked at, 22,765 chelation patients. 87% of the treated patients had improved cardiovascular function by objective measurement. So if you want to get more of this information, you can go to Dr. Cranton, DrCranton.com, and there's more detailed analysis and scientific references for all that. So what can you do now? You can take the basics, like I always say: multivitamin, multimineral, a good calcium, magnesium, not the junky calcium that clogs up your arteries, omega-3s, plus maybe in some people and most people need probiotics. Eat organic food and minimize processed foods. Work with a holistic practitioner like me or one of my mid-level providers at my clinic to refine your program. Detoxify regularly, clean up the gut, and chelate out heavy metals as recommended. And do a mini detox with your health practitioner. Don't eat food that's heated in the microwave in plastic. Use glass, polycarbonate, or stainless steel water containers. Exercise regularly. This supports natural detox. Get proper sleep, drink purified water, make sure your elimination is regular, all of those good things for your body. And then, yeah, do consider doing our mini detox program. It's usually 2 scoops. You work up to that 1 to 2 times daily. I think it's a little bit more of the clear change 10-day program. And you start with a half a scoop and work your way up so you don't detox too fast and feel yucky. I love this detox. It's the only one I do. I've never felt bad on it, actually, and I love it, and I do it twice a year. Also, probiotics are part of it. And this Advoclear, which helps your phase 3 liver detoxification. I have another whole lecture on just detox and how it works and phase 1, 2, 3, and all that. Should be on YouTube somewhere if you want to go check it out. But it contains a lot of liver support and detoxifiers to bind chemicals and some heavy metal toxins, especially if you do the Ultra Clear Renew. And there's a diet pamphlet given with it to the patient to eliminate common allergic processed foods. And we also tell you to stay on your purified fish oils. And anyway, we're going to be doing some new detox groups. Our charge nurse is going to be educating people on all the details of detoxification, why you want to do it, how to shop for healthy foods, and take you through, week by week and meet with you to keep you going on your detox and getting it done. It's not hard to do at all, and it doesn't have terrible side effects or anything like that. So that's why I love it. But we're going to start our detox groups coming soon to help you, motivate you to get through it. It's always fun to do something like this with a group, and then you can plan it, you can just do it, and you can get it done and cheer each other on and tell us all your wins. So we're going to be doing that soon. All right. Well, thank you for listening. I hope you learned a lot about heavy metals and why they are really bad for you and why they're so prevalent, and also about the different ways that we help patients get those out of the body, including chelation. And now you know what IV chelation is. We have oral chelation as well. And if you do want a PDF of this presentation with more facts and scientific data and copy of this presentation, just call our office. You can go to our website, or you can answer on this Facebook page that you're listening to this on, or call our office at any time. Natural Health Improvement Center, 616-301-0808. You may get the phone tree, you may have to leave a message, but someone will call you back. And we love to help people feel better, and we look forward to hearing from you. Best in health to everyone listening. Take care. Good night.